a period often defined by the idea of separate spheres for men and women, how far is this concept challenged in the sources available for the period?
So the source material is really clear in the sense that there's a very strong belief and investment in this idea that men and women have different duties, different obligations in society. And perhaps the best known example, and it's quite a beautiful set of essays, are by the art critic John Ruskin, who has a pair of lectures called Of King's Treasuries, about men's duty in the world, in the public sphere, and Of Queen's Gardens, which is about women's duties. Now, interestingly, he's not saying that women shouldn't do anything or that they don't even have a role to play in the wider society, but it's a different sort of feeling and tone to it. Women's duties, he says, are for sweet ordering and rule, to keep everything fair and to lead people by their moral example, but they stay safe, protected in their world. If they step outside it, that's their fault and they're lost. But as long as they're in their sphere and they're fulfilling their duties, we have a kind of even and positive society. So in that sense, wherever we look, we can see a very strong ideology, a very strong set of ideas that women should have these different roles and duties in society. But like any historical period, the actual reality is very, very different. The vast majority of women worked. Households ran on the daily labour of women lugging around buckets of coal, cleaning shoes, slopping out, hard physical work with no technology to help them in this time. And many, of course, had to work, to earn a living. So when we think about separate spheres, I think we have to be quite hesitant about who did it apply to, and was it ever really a reality that ruled women's lives? If you look at literature in the period, you can see women moving freely across the country in pursuit of jobs and their destiny, wherever we go. In history, there's a very important debate about separate spheres and what it means, because there was a very convincing argument that really the 19th century did change how women and men functioned in society together. And one argument is that with the rise of the Industrial Revolution and the development of larger cities, women's involvement, perhaps that might have been long-running over many centuries in family businesses, was no longer sustainable. So there's a kind of idea that there was at one point a golden age in which women and men worked side by side in family trades and businesses, each doing their bit. But with the rise of industrial society, the factory stays in the centre of cities, wealthy families move out to the suburbs, women can no longer be on site doing the books or minding the shop or taking their part in the running of the business. They're tucked away in the suburbs, playing the piano, receiving morning callers, being ladylike and genteel. So there's a very strong argument that some of the wider questions about the Industrial Revolution and the economy and development in the period lead to this separation of the lived experience of women's and men's lives. But in the last 20 or 30 years or so, historians have made some really important arguments about how real was this split? Maybe it might be true of some families in Birmingham, but really was there this moment in, say, around 1835, where suddenly all women were shut away and could no longer take an interest in political questions or social questions? So it's something to be rightfully sceptical about, I think, particularly when we turn to look at literature, which tells us often a very different story about what women were doing and feeling in the period.